The first time I heard him speak, my blood turned to ice. It was well past visiting hours when I stepped into the dimly lit corridor of St. Augustine Psychiatric Facility. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and something stale, something old. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, flickering in a rhythm that felt almost deliberate, like a warning no one was paying attention to. I had been here before, hundreds of times. As a forensic psychologist, my work brought me face to face with some of the most disturbed minds in the country. But this was different. This case was different. Doctor, Porter. A voice snapped me back. It was Officer Langley, one of the guards stationed outside the high-risk ward. He had the permanent look of a man who'd seen too much. His fingers tightened around his baton as he gestured toward the door at the end of the hallway. "You sure about this?" he asked. "You've read his file." I had, too many times. His name was Elias Finch, but the world knew him as the Listener. Convicted of 8 murders, though law enforcement suspected the real number was much higher. A predator who never used his own hands to kill. No, he only listened. He recorded his victims' final words, pleas, prayers, confessions, and then vanished, leaving behind nothing but the tapes. No one knew how he chose them. No one knew why. During his trial, Elias never spoke a single word. Not to his attorney, not to the judge, not even when they sentenced him to life without parole. Until now. I took a slow breath and pushed open the heavy steel door. Inside, the room was small, sterile, and cold. A single table, 2 chairs, a recording device in the center, and sitting on the opposite end, his wrists chained to the table, was Elias Finch. His presence was unsettling in a way I hadn't expected. He wasn't large, nor did he have the physical menace of the killers I'd studied before. His hands were thin, almost delicate. His face was sharp, hollowed out by years of confinement. But it was his eyes that unsettled me the most, dark and distant as if they weren't looking at me but through me. I sat across from him, placing my file on the table. "Mr. Finch." "Nothing." I clicked my pen. "You requested this session. You said you were ready to talk." Silence. I studied him. He barely moved, his fingers resting lightly on the table, his breathing even, calculated. Then, just when I was about to speak again, he did something I hadn't expected. He smiled. It was slow, deliberate, and almost amused. "Do you know why you're here, Doctor? Porter?" His voice was smooth, quieter than I had imagined. But there was something in the way he said my name that made my stomach tighten. I didn't respond, because for the first time in my career, I wasn't sure I knew the answer. For a long moment, I said nothing. I just studied Elias Finch, watching the way he sat, calm, composed, like this was nothing more than a casual conversation between old acquaintances. "Do you know why you're here, Doctor? Porter?" His words lingered in the air, curling around the room like smoke. I wasn't sure what he meant, and that was exactly what he wanted. I folded my hands on the table, keeping my expression neutral. "Why don't you tell me?" Elias tilted his head slightly, eyes locked on mine, searching for something. Then, he exhaled a soft chuckle. "You think you're in control?" It wasn't a question, just an observation, and it put me on edge. "You asked to see me," I reminded him. "I assume you have something to say." For the first time, Elias moved. His fingers, resting idly on the table, tapped once against the metal surface. A steady, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. Then he leaned forward, just enough for me to catch the faint scent of the institutional soap they made the inmates use. "I have a story for you." I adjusted my posture, retrieving my notepad. "I'm listening." Elias smiled at that, the irony not lost on either of us. "I want to tell you about the first time I ever heard someone die." A chill ran down my spine. His voice was soft, measured, like a man recounting a fond childhood memory. "I was 15. She was Let's just say she was someone I wasn't supposed to know. He lifted his wrist slightly, the metal of his cuffs catching the dim light. I remember the way she sounded when she begged, the way her voice cracked, the way her breathing changed when she knew it was the end. I kept my expression blank, but my grip on the pen tightened. You didn't kill her? Elias shook his head, amused. Number? I only listened. I glanced at the recorder on the table, its red light blinking steadily. And you've been listening ever since? A small nod. People always tell you who they really are in their final moments. His gaze sharpened. Don't you think so, Doctor? My stomach clenched. This was a test. A game. He was probing me, looking for something beneath the surface. I refused to take the bait. Why now, Elias? I asked instead. You stayed silent through your entire trial. You refused to speak to anyone for years. What changed? His smile faded. For the first time, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of something deeper. Because I found something, he said. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. Something I shouldn't have. I frowned. What do you mean? He leaned in just enough that I could see the intensity in his eyes. Someone's been listening to me. The room suddenly felt smaller. And I think you already know who. A slow, cold dread spread through me. Someone's been listening to you? I repeated carefully, watching Elias for any shift in his expression. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat back, running a single finger along the edge of his cuffed wrist. The silence stretched just long enough to make my pulse quicken. Then, he nodded. Yes. And not just listening. Recording. A dozen thoughts fired through my mind at once. Was this a manipulation tactic? A trick to unsettle me? Or was there something real beneath his words? You're telling me someone else has your recordings? I pressed. Elias's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I'm telling you someone has been collecting them. He tilted his head slightly. Just like I do. I glanced at the recorder in front of me, its red light blinking steadily. A sense of unease crept up my spine. And you think I know who it is? He didn't blink. Don't you? The way he said it, so certain, so casual, made my skin prickle. I kept my voice steady. Why would I? Tap, tap, tap. His fingers drummed against the table again, the rhythm slow and deliberate. Because, Dr. Porter. He leaned in just slightly. I've heard your voice on one of the tapes. Everything inside me went still. The room felt suddenly colder, the walls pressing in. I stared at Elias, searching for any flicker of deception, any hint that he was playing a mind game. But his expression was unreadable, calm, amused, lying. He had to be lying. That's not possible. Elias raised an eyebrow, as if my reaction entertained him. Isn't it? I forced my grip on the pen to loosen, willed my voice to stay even. If someone else has been making these recordings, that means they're still active, still out there. I studied him. Why tell me this now? His gaze sharpened. Because I need to know what you remember. A quiet buzzing filled my ears, a dull pressure at the base of my skull. What I remember. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, the steel door behind me creaked open. That's enough for tonight. Officer Langley. His tone was firm, his stance rigid. He stepped inside, casting a wary glance at Elias before nodding for me to leave. Elias didn't react to the interruption. His eyes stayed on me unblinking as I slowly pushed my chair back. I'll be back, I told him. This time he did smile. I know. As I stepped into the hallway, Langley shut the door behind me, the heavy metal locking with a finality that felt too permanent. I had come here to get into Elias Finch's mind. but somehow I had the sinking feeling he was already inside mine. I didn't sleep that night. Elias Finch's words followed me home, clinging to me like a shadow. "I've heard your voice on one of the tapes." It wasn't possible. It had to be a manipulation tactic, a psychological ploy to get inside my head. That's what serial killers did. Play games, plant seeds of doubt, pull you deeper until you couldn't tell what was real and what was carefully crafted illusion. But as I sat in my dimly lit apartment, staring at the glass of whiskey sweating in my hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't lying. Someone had been listening to him, recording him. And somehow, my voice was in the mix. I needed to be sure. Digging through my desk drawer, I found my old USB recorder, the one I used to document patient notes before switching to digital files. I hesitated for a second, then plugged it into my laptop. The screen blinked to life, casting an eerie glow across my cluttered desk. Most of the files were from past cases, their labels familiar. But there was one I didn't recognize. File 089. No date, no title, just a blank identifier. I swallowed hard and clicked play. At first, there was only static, a soft hum, distant and hollow. Then a faint rustling like fabric shifting against a microphone. And then, a voice. My voice. I went rigid, every muscle locking in place as the recording crackled through my speakers. Can't be real. A sharp inhale. The sound of footsteps. My own voice again, lower, uncertain. How long has this been going on? The static swallowed the rest. I yanked the headphones off, my pulse hammering. The recording was real, and I had no memory of saying those words. I forced myself to take slow, steady breaths, to think logically. Maybe it was an old session I had forgotten. Maybe I was questioning a patient, unaware that I was being recorded. But deep down, I knew better. The way my voice sounded, strained, unsettled, was different from my usual clinical detachment. I didn't sound like a doctor. I sounded like a man realizing something he wasn't supposed to. A cold sensation crawled over my skin. What was I hearing? When was this recorded? And who else had it? I reached for my phone before I could second-guess myself. Langley answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Porter, it's 2 in the damn morning. I need access to Elias Finch's tapes." My own voice sounded strange to me, distant. All of them. There was a long pause, then a sigh. "Shit. What did he say to you?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Just get me those tapes." Because if Elias Finch wasn't the only one listening, I needed to find out who else was. The psychiatric facility felt different at night. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I pulled into the parking lot, the glow of the security lights casting long skeletal shadows across the pavement. St. Augustine had always had an unsettling presence, but now it felt suffocating, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Langley met me at the side entrance, rubbing the exhaustion from his face. "You're really doing this now?" he muttered, unlocking the heavy door with a beep of his keycard. "The sooner the better," I replied. I wasn't sure if I was convincing him or myself. We moved quickly through the empty corridors, the overhead fluorescents buzzing faintly. Langley led me down a restricted hallway, past patient rooms where the truly disturbed were kept under constant surveillance. Even behind thick steel doors, I could hear muffled whispers, the occasional groan of someone lost in their own mind. Finally, we reached the records archive. It was a small, windowless room stacked floor to ceiling with file boxes and ancient computers that looked like they belonged in a police precinct from the 90s. Langley flicked on the lights and gestured toward a locked cabinet in the corner. "Everything we have on Finch is in there," he said, pulling a keyring from his belt. "Tapes, transcripts, shit. Probably some stuff the feds never bothered to listen to." I felt my stomach tighten. Langley unlocked the cabinet and stepped back. "You sure you want to dig through this?" I didn't answer. I just reached for the first tape. The label was handwritten, E. Finch, Session 04. I slid it into the old cassette player and pressed play. A low hum crackled through the speakers, then a voice, flat, measured. Elias Finch. Do you believe in echoes, Doctor? I tensed. The voice that responded wasn't mine. It belonged to Dr. Harold Klein, the psychologist who had handled Finch's case before me. Klein had retired a year ago, citing stress-related illness. Klein. Clarify what you mean, Elias. Finch. Some things don't die. They just repeat, over and over, until someone listens. A pause, then static, faint, distorted, and underneath it, a voice. I turned up the volume, straining to hear. A woman. Crying, her breathing ragged, desperate. Then, words, barely above a whisper. Please, tell him to stop. I went still. Langley must have noticed my expression. What? I didn't answer. I hit rewind, letting the tape wind back with a mechanical whir. I played it again. Please, tell him to stop. The voice was familiar. Not just familiar, intimate. I knew that voice because I had heard it before. Not on a tape. Not in a case file. In my own past. A cold chill ran through me. Who the hell had Finch been listening to? I hit start-stop and just sat there, my pulse hammering. The woman's voice still echoed in my head. Please, tell him to stop. I knew that voice. Not from a case file, not from a recording, from somewhere deeper, somewhere personal. Langley shifted beside me, arms crossed. You gonna tell me what the hell that was? I swallowed hard. Rewind it again. He frowned but reached for the dial. The tape whined as it spun backward. Another click, then the static returned. I forced myself to listen. The ragged breathing, the muffled sobs, and then those words barely above a whisper. Please, tell him to stop. I clenched my jaw. There was something buried beneath the static, just at the edge of hearing. A second voice. Distant, distorted, almost mechanical. I grabbed a pair of headphones, plugged them into the recorder, and hit play again. This time I closed my eyes and focused. The woman. Her voice raw with fear. The strange distortion underneath. And then, just for a second, another voice. Deep. Male. But warped. Like it had been slowed down. Not yet. I yanked the headphones off, my breath tight in my chest. Langley was watching me. What is it? I shook my head, trying to pull my thoughts together. This isn't just a recording of Elias Finch's victim. My voice felt unsteady. Someone else is in this tape. Someone else was there. Langley's frown deepened. You think he had an accomplice? I hesitated. Elias Finch never had accomplices. He didn't kill with his own hands, he just listened. But if someone else was in that room, that meant he wasn't the only one recording. A slow dread settled in my stomach. I turned back to the cabinet, rifling through the other tapes, searching for any label, any date that might give me something to work with. Then, File 089. I froze. That was the same label from the mystery file on my recorder. No date, no identifier, just those 3 numbers. I grabbed it, slid it into the player, and pressed play. Silence. Then, the soft rustle of movement. A low hum, distant and mechanical. And then, my own voice. Can't be real. A sharp inhale, my breath catching. How long has this been going on? I shut the tape off. My hands were clammy, my heart racing. Langley's eyes narrowed. Porter. I turned to him, my mind spinning. How the hell was my voice on a classified tape? Had I been here before? Had I heard this before? I couldn't remember. Langley studied me. Then, in a voice quieter than before, he asked, Are you sure you haven't listened to him before? I didn't answer, because for the first time I wasn't sure of anything. Langley's question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Are you sure you haven't listened to him before? I wanted to dismiss it, laugh it off, but I couldn't, because something was wrong. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles white. The walls of the archive room felt smaller, the flickering fluorescent light too harsh. My own breath sounded loud in my ears. I haven't listened to Elias Finch before. Have I? Langley's gaze stayed on me, waiting. But I didn't have an answer, not one that made sense. Instead, I turned back to the tape, forcing my voice to steady. This recording, it has my voice on it. I pointed at the label. But I don't remember ever being in this session, ever saying those words. Langley exhaled through his nose, rubbing a hand down his face. You're telling me this is... what? A fake? Spliced together? I don't know. That was the problem. I didn't know anything anymore. I pressed play again, forcing myself to listen. The static crackled, then... footsteps. My own breathing, uneven, and then... a sound in the background. Not words, not a voice. Something deeper, low and distorted like an old transmission buried in static. A whisper, stretched into something unrecognizable. I turned the volume higher. Listening. The word barely formed before the tape cut off abruptly. The sudden silence made my pulse jump. Langley let out a slow breath. That was him. I shook my head. Number. That wasn't Elias Finch. Because I had spent hours listening to his tapes. His voice was soft, smooth, patient. This was something else. Something wrong. Langley took the cassette from me, studying it like it might give him answers. Okay, let's say someone else is out there, recording these. What does that mean? I swallowed, my throat dry. It means Finch isn't the only one listening. There was a gap in my memory, a fracture I couldn't explain. The voice on the tape, it was mine. But I had no recollection of saying those words, of being in that session. And if someone else was listening in, recording, what else had I forgotten? I ran a hand through my hair, my fingers trembling slightly. Langley must have noticed. Look, Porter, maybe you're just... But I was already moving. I need to talk to him. Langley grabbed my arm. Hold on. I yanked free. Number. Right now. I need to ask him what the hell this is. I didn't wait for permission. I turned and walked straight for the high-security wing. I needed answers, and Elias Finch was the only one who could give them to me. I walked fast, too fast. The fluorescent lights overhead blurred as I moved through the empty corridors of St. Augustine, my mind churning. The tape, my voice, the missing time. I needed answers. Langley was right behind me, muttering curses under his breath. Porter, slow the hell down. I ignored him. My pulse hammered in my ears as I reached the high-security wing. The guard at the checkpoint, Murphy, gave me a wary look. Doctor, it's the middle of the damn night. What's going on? I leveled my gaze at him. I need to see Finch, now. Murphy hesitated, then shot a look at Langley. He good? Langley sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. I don't know, man. I clenched my jaw. Open the door. Murphy exhaled through his nose. Your funeral. He swiped his keycard, and the reinforced steel door clicked open. The cell was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a weak bulb overhead. The air smelled of antiseptic and something stale, like the walls had absorbed decades of quiet madness. Elias Finch was already awake, sitting on the edge of his cot, waiting. His dark eyes flicked up to meet mine as I stepped inside. His expression was unreadable, but his lips curled ever so slightly, like he'd been expecting me. I shut the door behind me. Tell me about the tape. My voice came out steady, but my hands curled into fists. Finch tilted his head, feigning curiosity. Which one? I stepped closer. Don't play with me, the one with my voice on it. For a moment, Finch just watched me. Then slowly, he leaned forward, his wrists still chained to his lap. You found it, he murmured. Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. What does it mean? I pressed. I don't remember that conversation. I don't remember ever saying those words. Finch's lips parted slightly, as if he were savoring the moment. Then he whispered, "But I do." The room seemed to tilt. I swallowed. You're lying. Am I? Finch tapped his fingers against his knee. Then why does your voice sound afraid? I clenched my jaw. When did I say those words? Finch leaned back, looking almost bored. A long time ago, before you knew me. My stomach twisted. That didn't make sense. We never met before your trial. Finch smiled. Didn't we? For the first time, doubt slithered into my mind. The missing time, the gaps in my memory, the familiarity of that woman's voice. What if this wasn't the first time I had listened? What if I had just forgotten? Finch's words sent a cold shiver down my spine. Didn't we? I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, that I had never met him before his trial. But something deep inside me, something I couldn't name, was already unraveling. The tape, my voice, the woman's desperate plea. I had forgotten something, and Elias Finch knew exactly what it was. I forced my breath to steady. Tell me what I don't remember. Finch's eyes gleamed in the dim light, his amusement barely concealed. He tapped his fingers against his knee in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Tap, tap, tap. You've already heard it, Doctor. His voice was almost gentle. But you haven't really been listening. My stomach twisted. I needed to stay in control, needed to keep this clinical. Stop talking in riddles, Finch. I stepped closer, my hands flat on the cold metal table between us. Tell me what I forgot. A pause. Then, his lips parted, and he said something that made my blood run cold. She knew you, you know. The air seemed to shift. I stared at him. Who? Finch smiled, but this time, it wasn't his usual taunting smirk. There was something almost sad in his expression. The woman in the recording. He leaned forward. She knew you, Porter. A pressure built in my chest. You're lying. Am I? His voice was quiet, steady. Then why does her voice sound so familiar? I clenched my jaw. I wanted to argue, to tear apart his words. But I couldn't, because I had already asked myself that question. Somewhere in my past I had heard her voice before. Somewhere in my past I had known her. Finch studied me, reading the doubt in my expression. Tell me, Doctor, how many of your own memories are real? The room suddenly felt smaller. I exhaled sharply, stepping back, trying to clear my head. This is just another one of your games. Finch tilted his head. Is it? The static on the tape, the missing time, the growing sense of something lurking just outside my reach. A memory that Finch wanted me to remember. Langley's voice crackled through my radio, snapping me back. Porter, you need to see this now. I turned toward the door. What is it? A hesitation. Then, we found another tape. Finch let out a soft chuckle, barely audible. I didn't wait. I left the cell, my heart pounding, Finch's voice echoing behind me. It's been there all along, Doctor, just waiting for you to listen. Langley was waiting for me outside Finch's cell, his face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. He held a tape in his hand. No label, no markings, just a blank cassette. Where did you find that? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Langley exhaled through his nose. It was buried in the archives, hidden. Someone didn't want us to hear this. I grabbed it, my fingers cold against the plastic. Without a word, we moved quickly back to the records room. The air felt heavier, thick with something unspoken. I slammed the tape into the player and pressed play. At first, nothing. Just faint rustling, the distant hum of an old machine. Then, a voice. Mine. Not real. This can't be real. My breath caught. I shot a look at Langley, but he was already staring at the recorder, his face tight with something I couldn't place. The recording continued. My breathing, uneven. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor. And then, another voice. A woman. Please. Tell him to stop. My hands clenched into fists. The same woman from the other tape. The voice I recognized but couldn't place. Langley's voice was quiet. Keep listening. The static crackled, then another sound. A deep, distorted voice. You don't remember, do you? I sucked in a sharp breath. Not Finch, not a victim. The voice was speaking directly to me. The recording continued, warped and fragmented. Footsteps, my own breath, fast and shallow. Then, a name, spoken in my voice. Catherine. A wave of nausea rolled through me. My knees went weak. I knew that name. Memories rushed in like floodwaters. A woman's laughter in a dimly lit bar. The warmth of her hand in mine. A night that felt like the beginning of something real. Then, flashes, blood on pale skin, a door slamming shut, a scream swallowed by the walls. I knew her, and I had forgotten her. Langley cursed under his breath. Jesus, Porter, who is she? I couldn't speak. My mind was spinning, unraveling. Finch's words echoed in my head. She knew you. Because she did, and I had buried it. The tape hissed, and then one last phrase, spoken in that same low, distorted voice. You listened to me once, and you will listen again. Silence. The tape stopped. I felt cold, hollow. Langley was looking at me like he wasn't sure who I was anymore. Maybe I wasn't sure either. I turned, walking away from the recorder, from Langley, from the walls of St. Augustine closing in on me, because the truth was suffocating. Finch hadn't just been playing a game. He had been waiting for me to remember. And now, I finally had.